Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. I guarantee you we are going to have a conversation today with Kelly Hopping about where to place your bets in 2025. As a CMO, so many places, we all have limited resources. We never have enough. Where do we place our bets to make the biggest difference this coming year? And what I want to tell you about Kelly, and I'm going to turn it over to you to expand on your background a little bit, but you're right now a CMO at Demandbase. You are a 4-time B2B CMO. In your background, you've actually been the CMO at Gartner over their digital markets business. And what I think is even more important than all of that is with Demandbase, your ICP, right? Your ideal customer profile is CMOs, right? You're a MarTech tool. So you're sitting down having dinners with CMOs all the time. You're talking with CMOs all the time. And I would venture to guess that you're in a really good position in order to really represent the voice of the CMO today and what we should be doing. So that's a lot on your shoulders, but I think we're gonna have a great conversation today. But what did I leave out? If you could maybe expand a little bit more on your background before we get started, that would be great.
Sure. Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I've been in, as you said, I've been in the B2B space for a long time. I've been in tech for about 2 decades. I spent about 4 years in consumer marketing as well and recognized the differences there in how we market. I also started as an engineer by degree. And so I think I have at least a decent understanding and appreciation for the technical side of the products that we're marketing, which is probably why I've ended up in tech for so long. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. And as you mentioned, the unique perspective that comes from being a CMO at a MarTech company. This is the first time I've done that at Demandbase. So all the other companies I've worked for primarily sold to like IT decision makers or chief data officers or chief security officers, which is great. They're a great audience, but I'm not them. So one, they had no interest in hearing from me. No one wants to talk to the marketer when you're at those companies. And two, my understanding of the persona was what was taught to me, not what I inherently knew from being one. And so the lovely and beautiful thing about Demandbase is when I speak with customers, it's truly authentic because I'm going through the same struggles they are. I have the same pain points they do. We run Demandbase on Demandbase, so I can be the voice of customer zero with the product in terms of like what works well, what doesn't, how we could use it more effectively, where the complexities lie. So it definitely offers a different perspective. I've never in my career had so much exposure to my target audience and what they're living and breathing every day. And I learn as much from my customers as they learn from me because we're all going through the same thing.
I love that. I've interviewed over like 125 B2B C-suite executives on this podcast. I'm always amazed. Every time we have a conversation, there's something to take away, right? As much as we think we're in our top of our careers and we have our playbooks and our ideas what to do, there's always room to learn. And I think that is a really good segue into your number one bet for next year. And that is betting on your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Tell us a little bit about that and why you have that as your number one bet.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few reasons, but I will tell you when I first got here, and I think it's super common, it's at most companies, is we don't want to leave any money on the table. And so we kind of say, oh, we should figure out a way to be, and we don't say this out loud because it sounds ridiculous when we say it, but we should figure out how to be everything to everyone. That's kind of how we end up being. We have a hard time saying no to business. We have a hard time turning away customer interest. We have a hard time understanding what could work or what doesn't work. And so as a result, we end up kind of saying, well, we could position our product like this for this audience and like this for this audience and this for this audience. But at the end of the day, you realize you have to have a North Star somewhere in who you're building the product for, who you're marketing it to, who you're positioning it for, how you're writing messaging, what their pain points are. And it's really hard to do that if you're trying to spray and pray across the universe. And so when I say betting on the ICP, it means we're going to pick an ideal customer and we're going to go after them. So that may be by size of company. That may be by job title, that may be by behavior, that might be by marketing budget, that might be by challenges. How complex is their sales cycle? How long is their sales cycle? How expensive is their product? How many products are they selling? All these things that help define who your ICP is, but you base it on data. So for us, for example, we figured out who our ICP was based on the product mix they were using and based on their spend and growth, as well as their retention. So we kind of
Mm,
said, there's an audience that we have that is great and they're predictable and we can get a lot of revenue out of them, but it's a long sales cycle and then they churn a year later. And
right.
so the cost of bringing on that customer is not worth it once they churn out because we've spent so many cycles to acquire them. Whereas we know this other, target audience that we have, they stay longer, they grow faster, they spend more, they're more invested, they become a real partner with us and get into the trenches with us and make us better. And so we build our product for them, we market for them, we prioritize our product enhancements around what that customer, what that audience needs. And it's just such an awesome filter to use when you're making business decisions and saying, should we run this campaign at this audience? Well, no, that's not our target. Should we build this feature into the product? Well, no, that's a feature needed by this audience, not our audience. And so all of a sudden you have, you just have a filter with which to run decisions through and a way to say no to priorities that are, or to low priorities in the business.
So I have so many questions from what you've been saying here. I'm going to prioritize them. Um, Once you define that North Star, that ICP that is at the profitability of the company's at the center of it, right? How do you then, so I know how you learn about your ICP, right? You're part of the ICP and you're having those dinners, you're talking to them all the time. Why? Why are you always talking to your ICP? Why is that important?
Well, I mean, for in my case specifically, and it's probably true across the board, but in my case, the market is changing so fast. And so for my target audience, they are chasing a moving target. So our
Mm,
pain points high level pain points maybe are the same. Like we're all trying to build more pipeline. We're all trying to
right.
contribute more impact to revenue. We're all trying to be more efficient in the way we operate. We're all trying to make better content, get more free stuff through SEO than paid stuff through paid media. So we all kind of have some general challenges, but in terms of the uh, the details and the nuance underneath that, it changes so fast. AI has sort of rocked the world. Pipeline, tactics that drove pipeline 2 years ago aren't working today. Things that didn't work 2 years ago are working today. And so we move so fast. And it's so different in marketing as to what works in, say, a SaaS business focused at the enterprise versus a hardware business focused at SMBs versus a services business. And so the challenges for CMOs are really nuanced in that way too. So for me, it's really worthwhile to talk and hear and brainstorm. I mean, you talked about what we learn here. I did a podcast this morning. I was the host interviewing and I took 2 pages of notes from my guests. And I was supposed to just be hosting, but I was like writing down feverishly because I was like, oh my gosh, I want you to come talk to my team because I love everything that you're saying. And so I think that's it. We're all like, there's so much information and content out there that it's hard to sort of distill the good stuff. And so as much as we can learn from each other, the better. So that's why I think I do it all the time, is because it changes all the time and it's different with everybody. And so trying to keep up is tough.
So, I had one CMO come on and say, here's what I've learned. My ICP is complex and always changing. So therefore, like in that kind of a context, do you ever plan to stop talking to CMOs? Or is this the kind of thing where, no, this is just an ongoing part of what you do and an important part?
It's definitely an ongoing part. I think in this, like I said, in this role as compared to any other, um, I've I've always wanted to kind of hear the voice of the customer, right? I mean, we do win-loss data. We'll do, when a customer leaves us, we'll do kind of exit interviews. I'll listen to gong calls, and you hear some things, you hear some insights, but you don't get to really like grasp it. And so for me, because I get pulled in, I meet with customers 3 or 4 a week, every single week. I either meet with CMOs that I reach out to network on my own because I want to hear and get to know and be top of mind there, or ones that I get pulled into sales meetings or sellers ask me to meet with their CMOs, customers. And so I get a chance all the time, and it's my favorite part of the job because
Yeah.
it's the way that I like remind myself, are we doing the right things? Are we giving them the right environment? Like I'll have one that says, I really wish there was more community around CMOs running on Demandbase. And I'm like, oh, let me go activate that. I'm like, hey, community team, we need one for
Yep.
CMOs because they're asking for it. And we're able to immediately solve that. Or they'll say, hey, I wish there was some really simple playbooks on how to just set up and prioritize my accounts. We're like, great. Hey, content team. Hey, expert team. Can we put together some really simple content for help our customers get on board? So it's just so actionable when it's my job. So I don't ever plan to stop that. It's not like an onboarding thing. It's like just part of the fabric of being a CMO here.
So a lot of CMOs that I've interviewed will say, I get a new CMO role. One of the very first things I'm going to do, I'm going to get on the phone. I'm going to call 10, 15, 20, 25 of our customers. I have a deep, in-depth conversation. So I kind of get my sea legs. Then I ask, well, how long do you do that? They're like, oh, that'll probably be my first quarter. I'll make that a top priority. And then they stop,
Yep.
right? Then they stop. As part of the bet on the ICP, the number one bet in the ICP for this next year what is your recommendation to other CMOs that are listening right now? That don't necessarily, right? They aren't their ICP. They might be reaching out to CTOs or, developers or who knows what their ICP is. But this
Right.
idea of being connected beyond gong calls and the fires that customer success puts out and the win-loss analysis, which are all really important.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation to the CMOs that are here today listening?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really is about it's about getting into like getting I don't want to say intimate. That's such a weird word. But getting into like authentic, deep conversations with your target audience. And you can use data to figure out how to um how to slice your audience to say, hey, this is the group. Like I was saying, like we looked at the data like an Excel exercise that kind of said, let's cut our audience all up by persona, by size of company, by industry, by product mix that they're buying, by whatever, to determine who are the ideal in terms of the guys who spend the most and grow the fastest and are, and stick around the longest, all of that. So we can do that part. But that's going to just tell you these guys, something's resonating with this group. Then you want to go actually sit with that group and actually get to know what they're struggling with. Understand like what is their pain point? What are we solving? What are their challenges? I hear all the time that are like, that sometimes CMOs, for me, it's CMOs aren't often the practitioner. And so they're not, so where I think our product solves XYZ, and that's how we should market it. The CMO is like, well, that's great, but I don't use the product. I manage a team of people who use the product. So
Right.
for me, I just want to know ROI. I just want to know how much pipeline can you accelerate with this product. I want to know what the impact is going to be on my business. And so all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, so my CMO audience actually is not the use case. The value prop is going to look very different to them. And so by spending time with all the people in that buying group, whether it's the actual user and practitioner, whether it's the key influencer, whether it's the budget holder, whether it's the downstream recipient of, I think those are all important. So for instance, for Demandbase, it's marketers. It's usually digital marketers, demand gen marketers who are running it. So I spend a lot of time with those. So sometimes that means I'm meeting with a director of digital or a
Right.
senior manager of demand gen or whatever, and that's who I'm talking to. But I learned with them like the real nuts and bolts of what's working and not working in the product, what they're struggling, what they wish it did more of. When I meet with the CMO, I'm more like, hey, tell me about cross-functional alignment around this product. Tell me how sales is adopting this product. Tell me how the organization is rallying around it. Tell me what questions you're getting from your CFO about spending money on this product. And that's a very different thing. So I mean, I guess the main thing I would encourage, I think it's why And this is sort of off topic, but I think this is why in this day and age, as compared to say, I don't know, 4, 8, 10, 12 years ago, why field marketing has become such a bigger deal.
Mhm.
I think it's because we used to either do we used to be like there wasn't digital, right? I lived in a
Right.
world where we're going to do print or TV. We're like, oh, we'll do print or TV because digital's a waste of money. Then we swung to like digital. I mean, print and TV are a waste. Everything is digital. Digital is all one directional. It's all just pushing content out. It's all transactional. It's hard to get into the heads. And then you have COVID hit, big events stop. And I think what rose out of that was these more intimate 8 to 10 person field marketing dinners, conversations,
Mhm.
thought leadership discussions, where people just really want to sit around and say, well, what's working for you? What are you struggling with? And so there's so much appetite for people. They want to share what they're struggling with because they want to hear that others are struggling with it too, or hear solutions of how they have solved it. And I think that's pretty fascinating. So I think any chance you can get out there with customers, sit in exec round tables, sit at a dinner, host a few practitioners, host people who churned off your product. Why'd they leave?
Right.
And
Right.
what could you have done different if you'd known? Like what would have kept them? And I think I mean, so that's where it's so important. And it is, like you said, it's ongoing. It's definitely not the first quarter. It is every quarter. In
So I'm going to ask you a question from a 180 degrees different angle.
Mhm.
So I used to work as the director of strategic planning for Mazda Motors of America, their agency, and we used to give people Miatas for a month, and then we'd take them away, and it'd be a deprivation study. Then we'd ask them how they feel about that.
Mm.
Mm. I'm going to ask you, would you feel if I said you're too busy, don't don't talk to any of these customers anymore, right? You don't have that ability to talk to the customer. How would that make you feel? How would that impact your ability to be successful as a CMO?
I mean, you'd be operating blind, right? You'd be
Yeah.
trying to guess what's going on in your customer's head. And I think that's really that's a scary place to be, right? That's the quickest way to kind of get out of touch with reality, right? It'd be like, I mean, I'm trying to compare it to like a Miata driver. My parents had a Miata for a while back in the day, and so yeah, I mean, I think it would be impossible. I think you could do it for a little while, but I think your messaging would become stale and stagnant very quickly. The authenticity of your messaging would become really out of date. It would turn into fluffy marketing,
Right.
buzzwords. It would sound like Me Too. It'd sound like every other company. I think that's where the fear comes in because you can't unlock that thing that makes you special, that secret sauce, because you can't tap into what you're solving. If you don't know what the pain is. So yeah, I mean, I think that'd be a killer for sure. Now, don't get me wrong. Prior to this job, I have probably done many jobs with that blindfold on
Yeah.
because, and it's been indirect. It's been more like, hey, I'm selling to IT decision makers. So I would take messaging to my like internal, like CIO or my internal CTO and say, hey, this is the messaging we're about to roll out. Would this resonate with you? Does this match? So there are alternative ways besides just your customer. Now, obviously, you can do focus groups, you can do whatever, but you do have internal. You look like your customer, so you can also go to your internal counterpart. But it's still a sample size of one who knows your product, who understands your product. So you're not going to get a full kind of unbiased reaction. So yeah, it's not ideal. This has taught me that I'll never go back to not talking to customers all the time, as long as they want to talk to me. Yeah.
Okay. I love it. Well, thank you. I want to get into kind of some of your other bets for next year.
Yeah.
And one is the role of AI in marketing. Why is that a big bet for you?
Yeah, I mean, AI, it's a couple different things. One, it's how do we position ourselves in AI leadership for our customers, as well as how do I adopt AI in my tech stack to operate more efficiently? So, I think a few things in the marketing world. I won't say I was a late adopter of AI, but I wasn't a jump first on the bandwagon. I was kind of like, I'm just going to test and try some of these different things. I'm going to wait and read a lot about what they work. I play with with, with ChatGPT and that kind of thing. But it took me a while, not took me a while, but it made me want to make sure because there's so much crud out there, right?
Yeah.
It almost makes me think of like the .coms in the early 2000s. You're like, how many of these are actually really good and how much are just a load of crap? And so trying to find the good ones was a little bit. So what we have been doing. So first of all, Demandbase um, is an AI powered platform. And it has been AI, machine learning, large language processing ever since, back since its inception 15 years ago or whatever. We've always been an AI product. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've always been this.
Right.
How do we capitalize on that in the market? Because the market is looking for AI in its job title, positioning statement, boilerplate, wherever. They want to know there's AI involved somewhere. And so how do we make sure that we reframe our own positioning to be like, hey, we've been AI all along. So let me reframe it around AI. The challenge on that is the second part, which is AI for AI's sake, right? Like there's a lot of AI whitewashing that is happening right now where companies are just sort of dousing themselves with
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
And that's fine if it sort of checks a box, but the so what is often missing. Like, okay, so what that you're AI? Like what value are you providing? What's the pain you're solving? Like what are you helping me do better? And I think that's where the sophistication of AI is getting a lot better in the way that it's marketed. That's sort of like the positioning of the company. We're working on that piece. The other side is how are we using AI internal? So we use it in a few different ways. We use it in the world of or the way that we're just starting to that are parts of our big acceleration for 2025. So the big bet we're making. We're using AI to augment our data, meaning that we're using a platform like Clay
Yeah.
to supplement for our SDRs. And again, it's not because I think AI is going to take jobs away. It's because I want the people working to be as productive, impactful, strategic as possible and use AI to remove the mundane.
Yeah.
And so if we can use AI to supplement their account profiles or their buyer profiles, their data, then they can spend more time outbounding and less time researching. And so I think that's super important. So that's one way. Another way we're looking at it is how can we use it to automate a lot of our sort of repeatable workflows.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
in the content world, some of that is, write this blog or take this 40-page ebook and break it into 6 blogs. That's a workload that can at least first draft can kind of be done with
Right.
AI because we've already written the original content. So how can we, splice it up? And then I take sort of human QA to follow behind it. But still, it's a way that you can sort of mass produce some derivative content off of original anchor pieces. I think that's really important. But it's also things like, hey, we want to extract win-loss data. And
Mhm.
so going to use an AI agent, if you will, to scan all these fields in Salesforce, extract the learnings, and create a win-loss report about sort of the key themes of when we win and when we lose. That's pretty awesome.
That's
That's
great.
Yeah, and then what can happen is then product marketing can use that to create great messaging. Again, not removing somebody's job, taking away the mundane so that people can be more strategic and impactful and bring their best selves into that role. So I think that's super important. Um, and then, our product is really evolving into an AI agent driven model, content creation in a scalable, differentiated way. I don't use ChatGPT to create uh, meaningful content. We use it to create an outline so then we can go write meaningful content. We use it to brainstorm headline ideas. Like, hey, this is headline I'm thinking, give me some alternatives.
Yeah.
And you get some creative thinking there. Or, hey, or like I said, take this big complicated thing and turn it into some smaller pieces. Some cool things with video. There's some voiceover stuff. Like there's a lot of things we can do that are just more scalable. And then from a product perspective, at Demandbase, our AI strategy is driven a lot around agents. And so we want to be able to use AI agents to help our customers automate their go-to-market workflows across their full
Mhm.
customer journey. So whether that's prioritizing accounts, or whether that's running campaigns, or issuing advertising, programs, or sending emails, whatever. As much as we can automate with agents is a big thing. So I think we're both a consumer of, a promoter of, a user of all things AI. So I'm excited about. Like I said, I think it's a revenue generator because you're getting more strategic brain power focused on results rather than a cost savings. I don't think of that at all. I think it's more of how can we be better because of AI instead of how do we become cheaper because of it.
Yeah, everybody's in this mode of how do I do more with less, right? Or
Yeah.
or the same, right? And AI is right here. I kept thinking about, your number one bet on the ICP and then what you're saying here in AI. And I kept thinking about all these conversations that you're having with your ICP.
Yeah.
And those are all, proprietary, like, this, like you have your own data in Salesforce. You're collecting information with every single conversation you have, points of view, questions, where they have challenges, where they don't know where to turn, right? That is an amazing amount of information right there in
Yeah.
itself. Because one thing we've been, taught with AI is the better the information we put in, the better the outcome is. The more generic our prompts and that anybody could use this, but we put our own information in, right? That's like the best thought leadership is when we have like our own studies we've done and research and we can bring something new to the market. Well,
Yeah.
not everybody's having the conversations that you're having, or the conversations you're having with their ICP can actually turn into really incredible content that can
Oh,
be fed in.
well, you're probably figuring that out with your podcast. I mean, I talk all the time with my content team, and I'm like, I've recorded, I don't know, 50 episodes or whatever since I've been here in the last year. I don't know exactly how many, but Demandbase, we have a Demandbase podcast called On Base. We just did our 500th episode. I'm like,
Yeah.
there is gold in there. We're talking
Yes.
to our ICP all day long.
Right.
So let's extract. So we're running AI against those 500 episodes to say, what are the themes? What are the brilliant nuggets? Like, what are the good things to be able to extract? And that is content for days. They're content in terms of like stuff we can publish and wrap up and use, but it's also insights for days on top of mind concerns. It's, you're asking me all these questions and I'm sharing my feedback. But to your point earlier, like my feedback is not always my own. Like it's coming from the 50 CMOs I've talked to in the last 3 or
Right.
4 weeks, right?
Right.
And the more I hear from them, I'm like, it's just like solidifying my own point of view because I hear so many different thoughts from customers.
It's a wealth of information. It's just connecting your top two bets to make it into the top super bet, right?
Yeah.
For next year. Let's
Absolutely.
move on. The next one is you're betting on sales and marketing alignment. What does that mean? Obviously, we know what alignment means, but why is that a big bet?
Well, first of all, in my line of business, because I'm in the world of account-based go-to-market, which by definition is sales and marketing alignment. That's what it is,
Yeah.
right? It's about
Yeah.
using shared accounts across marketing and sales so that we're all marketing outbounding to the same target list based on their intent, all those things. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important for demand base. And so it's what the product represents, but it's also how we want to operate to exemplify what we're committing and what we're promising with the product. It's a big problem, right? So
Right.
I talk to customers all the time about sales and marketing alignment. There's been so many studies. One of them says that 48%, so almost half of all C levels, all CMOs and CROs are struggling with sales and marketing alignment. That means
Yeah.
like literally half the ones out there are not aligned today.
Right.
Um, there's another study that shows that 10% or more of revenue is sacrificed when sales and marketing aren't aligned. When you're all marching to
Wow.
the same beat, when you're all committing. I mean, in this day and age, I don't know how many companies would give their right arm to get 10% revenue growth
Oh,
because
mm,
it's hard to come by these days,
right.
right? And so that's why it's so important. There was even a study that said that 66% consider sales and marketing to be sales and marketing alignment to be the number one thing to unlock their their growth. And that was up, that was like 60% a year ago. It's 66 now. So the needle has moved significantly. People are wanting to do more of this. They're just realizing, to your point earlier, like we have to do more with less. Resources are fewer. We can't afford for marketing to spray the universe and sales to
Right.
kind of guess and pick and choose. Like if we're not all marching against the same accounts with the same message, the same customer journey, the same handoffs, the same triggers, then we are wasting dollars.
Right.
And so I think that's why it's so important to me. And I want to make sure that our marketing team. I always joke with my team that my number one goal is for sales to love us.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that like I focus on nothing but pipeline. It means I want to give them a brand that they're proud to represent in the market. I want to give them a booth at an event that they feel proud to invite customers to be a part of. I want to host events that they're excited to bring their customers to because they know
Yeah.
how valuable and how well it will be executed. I want to give them content that's super easy for them to share and promote, and use as a carrot for their customers. I want to run campaigns that bring in the right audience that convert well for them. I want to give them pricing and packaging that's super simple
Mhm.
that they can quote to their customers. I want the messaging to be easy so that they can all sound like experts in front of their customers. So if we're doing all of those things, then sales is going to love marketing. Sales is going to close more business. Marketing is going to drive more pipeline. So that's my general passion about that topic.
Absolutely. I read another study that said the actual definition of the ICP, so your first bet, that there was only 16% alignment between sales and marketing on a true definition of the ICP.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
wow,
So,
yeah,
I think this is absolutely one of those things. I've done 7 different episodes on why do B2B CMOs fail so quickly with CMOs, and
yeah,
they mark alignment as one of the absolute top reasons why they weren't successful in their job. So
yeah,
I think it's a huge, huge thing to bet on. And,
yeah,
if you do things like your top 2 bets there, that it's going to make that alignment, especially defining that ICP. That's the number one thing that brings alignment together, right? You think about it naturally from their point of view, they've got a quota over their head, right? Their
yeah,
natural tendency is going to be, well, this might be not exactly, but it's revenue, right? And
yes,
I'm compensated on filling my quota and revenue, right? So, if we were compensated that way, we'd be thinking a little bit differently too. So but I've had conversations with CROs that are like, no, we have to say no, right? And there's reasons why, because we bring the wrong ICP in, the resources of the entire company are misaligned. We're not the best for them. Like you mentioned earlier, they churn, and it's a resource allocation kind of a thing where, look, we have a limited amount of resources and time. If we're not putting our bets on our best ICP, then we're wasting a huge percentage of our time and our
yeah,
opportunity, that 10% of revenue, right?
yeah. Well, I think what folks aren't always thinking, because as you mentioned, sellers are often compensated on revenue, right?
Right.
Filling revenue. What you don't recognize is that if you fill the wrong revenue and it churns, then next year you're going to have a higher revenue number because you have to offset the churn plus
Yeah.
grow. And so
Yes.
their numbers are going to get bigger if they go after the wrong customer that churns out. And so there is we've talked a lot about like, should retention be part of the sales quota? I
Right.
don't know, like to make sure that we go after the right customer. And it is a balance, right? And especially now, I think a few years ago, you could get away with kind of this growth at all cost mindset, where it was just about like close, 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 close.
Right.
And I think now, in the past few years when the market dropped and Silicon Valley Bank went under, I think a lot of the funding, sort of the cash in the market, the capital markets kind of disappeared. And so then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, no, 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 we need to be a sustainable business that doesn't need to raise cash. In order to
Right.
be a sustainable business means we need to not just be about growth at all costs, we need to be profitable. And
Right.
if we need to be
Right.
profitable, then we need to choose the right customers that are best for the entire P&L, not just for the top of it. And I think that's a different mindset. And it's a little bit more of a complex dance to do with sellers, with CS teams, with marketers, to make sure that we're optimizing for the full formula, and not just revenue.
Well, and not only do the wrong customers churn more, but 30 to 40% of new annual revenue with B2B companies should be coming from expansion of existing customers.
At least.
So it's
Absolutely.
it's not just churn and all the bad things there, but if you have customers that are churning, they're certainly not going to
They're
stick
not
around and
expanding.
expand your
Yep.
revenue, right? And we spend
Yeah.
so much time chasing new logo development, right? Where we have this 30 to 40% of revenue opportunity sitting right there within our existing client base. We
Yeah.
better bring the right clients into that base, or we're going to miss a huge opportunity. So,
Well, one more thing about the ICP, sorry, because as you're talking about it, one of our other big bets for next year is thinking about that our IC we have our new business ICP. We also have our sort of in target accounts there. We also have our customer ICP new target accounts. So we're running ABM on the customer side as well as the new business side for exactly your point that
yeah,
we want to know. And it's not across every customer we have. It's who are the customers that are strategic bets that are growing fast, that are coming up for renewal, that we want to
right.
make sure they feel valued, that they're getting the most out of the product, that they're growing with us, that they're going to retain and renew their contract. So that's a different ABM motion. But to your point,
Yes.
it's at least 30-40% of your growth, if not more.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, one of the biggest takeaways, after all the conversations I've been having is we spend so much time going after new logo development. We all know what was the stat? It's like 5 times easier to, expand an existing customer than it is to conquest a new customer.
Yep.
Right? Even if it was half of that. I don't know what the exact study is. I think that's just one of those
Yeah.
folklore things, right? We all know, but we know innately, right? So that's one of the big takeaways here too is define an ICP that you can grow with, not just
Yeah.
retain, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think the conversion rates on at least what I've seen in my career is the conversion rates on a new customer, getting them from pipeline to close versus an existing customer expansion pipeline to close. It's almost like partner marketing. Like
Right.
it's 2 to 3x the conversion rate because they already trust you.
Right.
And so it's a safe, smart bet to go after.
So Kelly, we've talked about so much, and I know we could go on for hours here. If there were one thing that you wanted the audience that is consuming this podcast today to take away, one thing to remember, what would that be?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. I would say to uh to to not be afraid to focus. I think don't try to be everything for everyone.
Mm,
Try to understand who your best and brightest strategic bet is. We used to say when I was at Kraft Foods, we had the strategic value customer. We put them at the center of the bullseye, and we'd say, this audience should generate 50% or more of our growth for the year. Everybody else is halo. And so if
mm,
I can nail them, I'll get the other 50% just through the residual halo that comes off of it.
mm,
Doesn't mean that you necessarily turn away all the other business, but it means you are laser focused in who you are talking to, what you are solving for them, what they are doing, what their pain points are. And I think that is where it's the fastest way to drive sales and marketing alignment. It's the fastest way to drive your financial bets. It's your fastest way to know, and it doesn't have to be forever. You may look at it and be
right,
like, "Oh, we slightly missed. Like, let's pivot slightly." And that's okay. You can move the target around. You just can't have no target.
right.
You got to have a place to look. So that would be the biggest thing I would say.
Well, thank you. I know that there's going to be people that have questions after watching this. Would it be appropriate that we gave out like a link to your LinkedIn profile that people could reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Kelly Hopping with 2 P's, like a bunny.
All right. Well, Kelly, thank you so much. All these insights, incredibly valuable and a reminder, a lot of them for what we know we need to be doing. We need to be talking to the customer. We need to be laser focusing, right? We need to be expanding existing client relationships. Uh, but it really is helpful to have somebody with your background and knowledge to be reminding us and giving us ideas on how to do that. Thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And thanks for teaching me stuff too. Through this conversation, I've learned a lot as well.